When I ask you, what's the king of cinema cameras, what do you see in your little brain? Red? This Sony Handycam? Most of us would probably say the Arri Alexa, because it's the most popular camera used in Hollywood feature films.
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
Not you, Alexa. Real Alexa. But you can't have a king without a queen and a prince and a princess, and this analogy sucks for an intro. I'm talking about the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K G2. This camera that you're seeing footage from. It's real good, and it's the Prince of Cinema, and let's just start the video. Boys and women, this camera, the Ursa G2, is incredible. When it first got announced, I honestly couldn't even believe my little baby blue eyes when I saw that spec sheet. In my opinion, I think it has the perfect list of specs, especially for the kind of work that I do, which is music videos, interviews, some weddings even. I've taken this on a couple wedding films, small commercials, that sort of thing. Listen, this camera has its flaws. I'm not gonna be a Blackmagic fanboy and worship this thing. Can't we just be nerdy for a minute and talk about all the cool stuff Blackmagic poured into this black basin of love? Let's do that. You get a Super 35 sensor with 4,608 by 2,592. Wow, that was right. And it supposedly has 15 stops of dynamic range. I don't know how to measure that, but it does look really nice. You can shoot 4.6K all the way up to 120 frames per second, 4K DCI up to 150 frames per second, and 1080 up to 300 frames per second. And ladies and gentlemen, that's all in Blackmagic RAW. It looks beautiful. EF mount, but you can also get a PL adapter from Blackmagic. You get 2 to 6 stops of built-in ND on this little spin wheel. Look at this. Wouldn't that be terrible if I left this on? 2 XLR inputs that actually sound good. The built-in monitor obviously is nice, and the ability to record to SD cards, CFast cards, and SSDs. And we'll get into that mess a little bit later, but it is nice to have those options. Okay, so the specs are freaking awesome. I think they're amazing. And honestly, I think 4.6K is the perfect resolution for today's day and age. I know there's cameras that do 6K and 8K, but 4.6K is really nice because if you wanna finish in 4K, you can squeeze your stuff down, downsample it into 4K, and you get these beautiful, sharp images from this camera. Or if you're doing a 1080 timeline, you get even more squeezability. And with both 4K and 1080 timelines, you get the option to zoom in and recrop, reframe, and post with that extra 0.6 on the 4K. It's nice. I just gotta say it. I just gotta be truthful. The images coming out of this camera are freaking gorgeous. I honestly love it. I've been so used to editing footage from the Lumix GH5, and when I first got this camera and put some footage on my computer and did a side-by-side, it just wasn't even a comparison. This camera it's just that next level up. With some mirrorless cameras, like I tested the Sony a6600, which is obviously way smaller, it's a different price bracket. Those Sony images are super sharp, but not in like a nice detailed kind of way. It just looks like you threw a sharpening filter on it after editing and jacked it way up. Whereas the images from a camera like this are gorgeous and sharp, but it's more detail than like that really crazy sharpness. You know what I'm talking about? Like this. We don't want this. We want this. This is beautiful. It's sharp, but it still looks really nice and just smooth and gorgeous. This camera, the Ursa G2, would truly be the perfect A-cam to those little pocket boys. You got your pocket 4K and 6K. These 3 cameras together would be like the perfect rig, especially for budget shooters. But there are some issues when it comes to pairing this Blackmagic with different brands like Red. Okay, we're still rolling. Me and my filmmaking boyfriend shot this music video you're looking at in New York a couple months ago, and we ran into a couple problems with the Ursa. The first issue was the built-in monitor on the Ursa started to freeze up because we were shooting in really cold conditions. And I actually learned from one of my subscribers in a previous video that there's liquid crystals inside of LCD screens, and it got all blizzardy and cold in there, and they did not want to play nice with each other, so it started to have this ghosting effect on the monitor. What we ended up doing was just using an external small HD. We didn't have any problems with the actual footage, it was just the image on the monitor on the Ursa. The other problem came in post-production of this music video. The A-cam on the shoot was my boyfriend's,
Idiot.
People are gonna think I have a boyfriend, which is fine. So the A-cam on the shoot was the Red Dragon 6K, and then B-cam was this Ursa G2. It was my job to edit this music video and color grade it, make it look as yummy as possible, and color matching those two cameras was very difficult. And neither camera looks bad, and I wanna stress that. I really like how the Red looks, and I really like how the Ursa looks. They're just really different. And the biggest difference is just the raw workflow of each of these codecs. So here's kind of a quick pros and cons of each codec. The R3D codec has been around for a lot longer than Blackmagic RAW. So all these companies and their editing softwares like Premiere know how to handle it and update it and everything like that. Also with R3D, you get even more control over your raw image than you do with Blackmagic RAW. So you get color curves for the exposure, red, blue, and green channels in the raw tabs, which is just so incredibly nice. You can fully customize this image basically. It's almost like editing a photo in Lightroom. Blackmagic's RAW codec plays back smoother than the R3D codec, so you can play back this raw footage in Premiere full quality and have like almost no skipping at all. It's actually kind of crazy. You can play back the R3D codec in Premiere as well, but you kind of have to go to a quarter or half quality. It all depends on your computer too. But with Blackmagic RAW, you don't get the same amount of customization. Is that a word? You can still change your ISO and change a lot of things. Like, it's still amazing, but at least in Premiere, it just freezes up a lot. And I wanna know from you Pocket Boy owners if you guys struggle with this same problem. Maybe it's just an Ursa thing. I have the firmware totally updated, all my programs are updated, and I know that Premiere is probably the one at fault here. They have a history of being slow to catch up to camera codecs. It is still frustrating. It's been the most problematic thing during my time with the Ursa. And before you DaVinci boys get all hot and heavy with your keyboards, just zip it for a second. I did attempt to download Resolve and learn it, and I actually really liked it. I could not, for the life of me, get my Premiere timelines to open up correctly in Resolve. I was prepared to add this step to my workflow, to do all of my color work in Resolve, export from Resolve, and just be done with my project. But anytime I tried to export an XML from Premiere, put it in DaVinci, no matter what I did, the Ursa footage would be off time. Like the time code was mixed up or something. The footage I edited in Premiere was not the same clips that were showing up in Resolve. I just think the problem lies with Premiere Pro and how Blackmagic and Premiere communicate. Adobe, Blackmagic, can you just like figure your crap out and smooch and just get it to work, please? But for all you boys and girls that do your editing in Resolve anyway, you don't have to worry about any of this. You're probably smooth sailing, getting that full control, easy editing. Maybe I should just switch. I don't know. Okay, so this camera is a prince, but with riches comes fatness. This analogy, I gotta pick better analogies, but damn it. When you're building this camera out and creating your rig with it, the biggest thing you need to be aware of is the weight and size. The body alone is 5.1 pounds, so when you start adding batteries, lenses, accessories, this boy get thick. I personally decided to get the SSD reader for this camera, and although I'm saving money on media, it did make the camera about 2.5 inches longer, so it's freaking huge. This picture of me holding this camera with the 70-200 shows that quite well. These 1 terabyte SSDs I'm using cost only about $100 each, and they allow you to shoot any frame rate in RAW. There are certain limitations, but I have a video explaining that. All you need to know is you can do RAW in any frame rate with these SSDs. In retrospect, however, I think that it would be smarter to just save up extra money if you can and just buy one really nice CFast card, 1 terabyte. Having a little bit smaller package would be nice. That's what she said. The rig I have right now is impossible to put on a gimbal. My friend has the Movi Pro. We tried to put it on there. Don't work. I do like the size and the weight. It's not too heavy, but it's just long, dude. Big cam. I have a friend who has this same rig as me, and he did have an SSD fail on him, and he lost a project. It was a tragedy. It was very sad. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. I don't know what you want to do with that information. I would just recommend CFast at this point. If they would shrink this camera down to like Red Raven size, it would be my perfect camera. And don't talk to me about the pocket cameras because they look like shoes. Sideways shoes with lenses on the front. Blackmagic fanboys and girls, I will give you one thing. The user interface on these cameras is perfect. It's very simple, very minimal, clean. It makes sense. And there are a ton of buttons on this camera, but I rarely use them because everything is just easily accessible on the inside of the monitor and the touchscreen. There's only a couple buttons that I physically use. Everything else, fingertips, scrolling, dude. It's amazing. I'm sure all the buttons are useful for like TV production or other kinds of production, but for what I do, everything's accessible through the screen and it's great. Also, the way Blackmagic makes you format your media is genius. You have to click on the SSD icon, hit format, hold down the format button again for 3 seconds till this little circle thing loads, and then when it loads, you format it. So if you accidentally format, you're dumb. The XLR preamps are also really clean. They do a really good job. We've used this camera on a ton of interviews and just had our boom mic go straight into the camera just to keep things quick. Here's some samples.
You.
So good. Such a good review, Zach. Thank you for showing us those samples. You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. You get NDs, and they're really nice. The only problem is now, when I shoot on a camera that doesn't have this, I become a whiny little bit. This camera is actually pretty decent in low light situations. You can get up to 1600 ISO and have clean images, which is really cool. It's definitely better than the previous generation of Ursa, which had some struggles with those weird noise patterns. If you're lighting at all, you don't have to worry. You're gonna get clean looking images. One thing I have noticed is I think this sensor just requires more light than other sensors in general. If you set the settings of this camera the exact same on a red camera, this camera will look a little darker. That's what I've learned. With most cinema cameras, you buy it and it's this metal box that comes in the mail and you gotta buy a million things to get the thing to turn on. The Ursa G2 functions a lot like a mirrorless camera in that sense, where it doesn't require much to get going, and I think that's what makes this a unique cinema camera, because it has the really good image quality, but the simple and easy functionality of the mirrorless world. It's really special. The weird thing is, it feels like Blackmagic didn't really push this camera super hard in marketing. Last year, all we heard about was their quadruple XL pants pocket cameras, which are cool cameras and they make good images, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it just kind of left the Ursa on the side of the road. And honestly, I'm just not really sure who to recommend this camera to. It's $6,000, which is a lot for some of us, but way cheaper than most cinema cameras. You get this crazy list of specs, beautiful color, built-in NDs, good audio preamps. It's a thick boy and Blackmagic Raw struggles in Premiere, but overall this thing is amazing and I love it. And honestly, I think the image quality lives up to a lot of cameras that are way more expensive than this camera. But Blackmagic, make your names shorter with your cameras. Bye. Thank you for watching my video. These people on the screen are my lovely patrons. Thank you all so much for supporting me during Q-teen. It's been wild. This is kind of my full-time gig, even though I'm not making enough to live, but thank you especially to my $9 or more patrons. I would like to shout out two of you, Rhonda Mayfield and Zachary Thayer. Love you guys so much. Thanks for taking care of me during this crazy time, and hope you're all staying safe.